My name is Tom Wilson, and if I had to describe the defining moment of my relationship, it wasn't a kiss, or a holiday, or even the night she moved into my house. No, it was the night she looked at me in my own kitchen and told me, "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." Everyone laughed. Her three friends, Tiffany, Brittany, and the one whose name I can never quite remember, let's just call her Chardonnay, threw their heads back like a pack of wild birds. The sound was sharp, high-pitched, merciless. I stood there with a wooden spoon in my hand, pasta sauce dripping onto the tile, and smiled. I didn't argue. I didn't snap back. I just smiled like I had forgotten how to be human. It's funny how humiliation works. Some people scream, some cry, some storm out of the room. But me, I went quiet. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of something more dangerous. The moment when a man decides to stop trying. You see, Jessica and I had always disagreed about reality itself. I believed that if you live under the same roof, eat the same food, and share the same Wi-Fi, you're in a partnership. That's not old-fashioned. It's basic logic. But Jessica, she saw herself as some celestial body, dazzling and untouchable, orbiting wherever she pleased. And me? I was just a small, insignificant planet caught in her gravity. We had been together for 2 years, and for the past 6 months she'd been living in my house. My house. My name was on the mortgage, on the bills, even on the little plaque by the door that read The Wilsons. She had bought it without asking me. At the time, I thought it was sweet, maybe even a little optimistic. Looking back, I realize how absurd it was. She was play-acting at family life when it suited her, and tearing down the idea of commitment when it didn't. I'm a simple man. I work from home as a graphic designer. I like my peace and quiet. My wild Friday nights usually involve frozen pizza and maybe a movie I've already seen 3 times. Jessica was the opposite. Her life was theatre, and her audience was always those 3 friends of hers. The harpies, the Greek chorus cackling at every line. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. I was at the stove, stirring dinner, when Jessica swept into the kitchen like she was walking a runway. Phone pressed to her ear, her voice carried into every corner of the house. She laughed, shouted, nodded to no one. Her friends on the other end filled the silence with shrieks. "Oh my God, yes, I am so in," she gushed. "A weekend away is exactly what I need." "No, he's not coming. Don't be ridiculous." She hung up, glowing with excitement, and announced, "Good news. The girls and I are going to the lake this weekend. Leaving tomorrow." This was news to me. I hadn't been asked, hadn't even been told. She said it as if she were informing her landlord, not her partner. Still, I tried. I stirred the sauce and asked calmly, "Which lake?" It was an ordinary question, logistical, even caring. A normal couple would talk it through, maybe laugh about packing, maybe argue a little about sunscreen. But Jessica looked at me like I'd just asked her to recite quantum mechanics in ancient Greek. Her eyes widened, her lips curled. Then she turned to Tiffany, who had just walked in, and said, loud enough for the walls to remember, "Can you believe him? He wants to know where I'm going." Tiffany sneered at me like I was a chair that had overstayed its welcome. Brittany and Chardonnay joined in, gathering like storm clouds around Jessica. And then Jessica herself delivered the line that still echoes in my head. Not because it hurt, but because it changed everything. "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." The laughter that followed was crueler than anything she could have said. It was the laughter of people who saw me not as a man, but as a joke. A stranger in his own kitchen, mocked for the crime of caring. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The version of me that tried to compromise, that held his breath to keep the peace, packed its bags and left. All that remained was silence. But here's the thing about silence. It's powerful. Across cultures, silence has always been misunderstood. In Japan, it can mean respect. In some parts of Europe, it signals suspicion. In relationships, silence often looks like surrender. But mine was strategy. Jessica thought she had won. She patted my cheek like I was a child, gathered her harpies and swept out of the house, laughing all the way. To her, this was just another performance. She was the star, and I was the silent backdrop. But performances end, and when the curtains fall, reality has its say. That night, alone in the kitchen with only the bubbling pasta sauce for company, I realized something. If Jessica believed we weren't married, if she believed I had no say, then I would take her at her word. Words shape reality. They draw the lines of what is possible. And if she wanted to draw a line between us, I was ready to believe her. I stood there for a long time, spoon in hand, the sauce slowly burning at the bottom of the pot. Then, almost without realizing it, I smiled again. But this time it wasn't empty. This time it was the smile of a man with a plan. Not married. No say. Got it. And so, while Jessica laughed over cocktails at some pre-weekend party, I stood in the quiet of my home and whispered to myself, the weekend is going to be fun after all. Just not for her. Silence has a weight to it. After Jessica and her chorus of harpies slammed the door behind them that Friday night, the house became so still, it felt like a cathedral after the congregation has gone. I stood in the kitchen, spoon in hand. The pasta sauce left to bubble and spit. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt clarity. It's strange, isn't it? How the breaking point of a relationship can feel less like an explosion and more like a release. The moment Jessica spat those words, "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with," something inside me snapped free. I had been carrying the invisible burden of compromise, of biting my tongue, of trying to keep the peace. And in that instant, I set it down. I didn't pace the room in anger. I didn't text her back venom or call my friends to vent. No, I just stood there, spoon dripping sauce onto the floor, feeling a strange kind of calm. A philosopher might call it detachment. A psychologist might say it was disassociation. But I know what it was. Strategy. Because if Jessica was right, if I truly had no say, then I was finally free. You see, Jessica and I had been living in a kind of unspoken contract. She got the excitement, the social performance, the constant validation of her friends. I provided the stage, the house, the bills, the fridge stocked with food, the Wi-Fi that never failed. And for a while, I thought maybe that was enough. Maybe that was love. But in that kitchen, as the last echoes of her laughter faded, I realized something important. Words matter. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. When someone tells you what the relationship is, believe them. And when someone draws a line in the sand, you don't step over it to beg them back. You stand still and let them live on their side. It's almost funny when you think about it. Throughout history, people have tried to define what a partnership is. In ancient Rome, marriage was less about love and more about contracts, property, heirs, alliances. In modern times, we dress it up with romance and hashtags. But at its core, it's still about agreement. What do you give? What do you take? And how do you live together? Jessica had answered that question for me. Her version was freedom without responsibility. Mine was respect tied to contribution. We were not speaking the same language, and maybe we never had been. So there in the kitchen, I decided to stop translating. I poured myself a drink. The sauce burned, filling the house with the smell of scorched tomatoes, but I didn't care. I sat at the table, the silence humming like electricity, and started to think. A plan began to form. Not out of malice, not even out of revenge. Out of agreement. If she believed we weren't married, if she believed I had no authority in her life, then I would extend her the same courtesy. I would remove myself from the role of the patient, compromising boyfriend. I would stop being her audience, and I would take her words seriously. But there was something else, something deeper, gnawing at me. It wasn't just about Jessica. It was about me. My house no longer felt like mine. The beige pillows, the endless little decorative bowls that held nothing, the art that looked like a printer had run out of ink. All of it whispered compromise. My home had become a showroom for someone else's identity. I was a tenant in my own space. So the plan wasn't just about Jessica leaving. It was about me returning. Returning to myself, to my tastes, to the life I wanted to live. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking of all the small ways I had given ground. The rug I never liked but pretended to. The couch too pristine to sit on comfortably. The friends I tolerated because Jessica needed an audience. Piece by piece I had traded myself away, and now I wanted it back. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to fight Jessica. I wasn't going to beg her to understand. I wasn't even going to warn her. She had said we weren't married. She had said I had no say. Fine. Then this house was mine again. Fully. Absolutely. Without negotiation. The first move would be delicate. If I was going to transform the space, I needed more than my own two hands. I needed an ally. Someone who could play a part in what was about to unfold. Someone who understood the power of theatre, because make no mistake, this was going to be theatre. My mind turned to Mrs. Gable, 80 years old, widowed, and sharper than a blade. She had a rose garden that could win competitions and a surveillance network that would put the CIA to shame. Nothing happened on our street without her knowing. She loved gossip, but more than that, she loved drama, and I suspected she would love mine. But that was for later. For now, I sipped my coffee, feeling the quiet hum of anticipation settle in my chest. Jessica was gone for the weekend, laughing with her friends at the lake, convinced she had put me in my place. What she didn't know was that I had found my place. And by the time she came back, she wouldn't recognize the house she left behind. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Sunlight poured through the windows, unfiltered by the endless curtains Jessica had insisted on hanging, as if natural light itself were a threat to her curated beige aesthetic. I made myself coffee, not the oat milk latte she preferred, but strong black coffee, the kind that bites back. It was the first small victory of the day. But even the best generals know they don't win wars alone. If I was going to pull off my plan, I needed an ally. Not just any ally, but someone reliable, discreet, and, above all, willing to play a part in what was going to become a carefully staged performance. That's when I thought of her. Mrs. Evelyn Gable. To outsiders, she looked like your typical sweet, cardigan-wearing grandmother. 80 years old, silver hair always perfectly set, and a smile that could thaw the iciest winter. But beneath that gentle exterior was a woman with a mind like a steel trap and a heart that beat for drama. She lived alone ever since her husband passed away nearly a decade ago. But in place of family, she cultivated two great loves: her prize-winning rose garden and her role as the self-appointed watchdog of the neighborhood. You couldn't so much as sneeze on our street without Mrs. Gable knowing about it. Delivery trucks, unfamiliar cars, late-night arguments. She saw them all from her porch, and usually with binoculars. The woman was a walking CCTV system wrapped in lace. I baked my way into her good graces years ago. Lemon cake. She adored it. So that morning, armed with a fresh slice and a smile, I walked across the street to her porch. "Morning, Tom," she said, rocking gently in her chair. Her voice always carried a little rasp, like she'd smoked a pack a day back in the 60s, even though she hadn't. "Out early, I see. Everything all right at your place?" I chuckled and handed her the plate. "Depends on your definition of all right, Mrs. Gable. I need your help with a situation." Her eyes lit up in an instant. You would have thought I'd handed her the opening scene of a play. She leaned forward, conspiratorial. "Oh, what kind of situation?" I sat down beside her, lowering my voice. "It involves Jessica, and a little theatre." At the mention of Jessica's name, Mrs. Gable's sweet smile vanished, replaced by the pursed lips of judgment. She had never been particularly fond of Jessica, though she was too polite to say so outright. Still, her silence every time Jessica passed by in her glittering outfits said more than words ever could. So I told her, every detail, Jessica's words, the mockery, the laughter in my own kitchen. I repeated it exactly, no embellishment required. "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." By the time I finished, Mrs. Gable's hand was on mine, her expression sharp with indignation. "That shameless little hussy," she muttered, her voice carrying all the venom of someone who had seen too much disrespect in her lifetime. "Don't you worry, Tom. You leave it to me. What's my line?" Her readiness startled me, though I shouldn't have been surprised. Mrs. Gable had been waiting for a role like this for years. This was her Broadway, her grand stage, and she wasn't going to miss it. I explained the plan. Jessica would return Sunday evening, expecting to waltz back into the house as though nothing had changed. Only this time she'd find herself locked out. The locks would be changed, her belongings carefully packed and relocated, and the house transformed into something unrecognizable. That's where Mrs. Gable came in. She would play the innocent neighbor, delivering carefully scripted lines to Jessica at just the right moment. A little twist of the knife dressed up as sweet concern. She didn't just nod, she rehearsed. "Oh, Jessica dear, is that you? Oh, I heard the most wonderful news. Tom's been celebrating his freedom all weekend. He redecorated the whole house, and he got a dog. Such a beautiful, loyal creature. Isn't that lovely?" She practiced the words like an actress preparing for curtain call. Each syllable dipped in honey, but sharpened with purpose. Watching her, I couldn't help but marvel at the irony. Jessica thought life was a performance. She treated our relationship like a stage, her friends like a chorus. and me as a prop. And now she was about to be outperformed by an 80-year-old widow with roses in her front yard and the instincts of a Shakespearean queen. But it wasn't just about revenge. That morning, as I sipped tea on Mrs. Gable's porch, I realized something deeper: generational perspective. For her, love and partnership weren't disposable. She had been married for nearly 50 years before her husband passed. 50 years of shared responsibilities, of compromises, of sacrifices. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't always easy, but it was real. And to see Jessica dismiss commitment so casually, to laugh at it, it wasn't just offensive to me, it was offensive to her entire worldview. In that moment, Mrs. Gable wasn't just my ally. She was the voice of a generation that still believed in loyalty, in partnership, in keeping promises. Jessica, with her Instagram-fueled independence and her harpies cheering her on, represented the opposite: freedom without roots, validation without responsibility. We sat there for nearly an hour, sipping tea, trading lines, polishing her performance. By the time I left, she was practically glowing. "Don't you worry, Tom," she said, patting my hand with surprising strength. "By the time I'm done, she'll wish she never set foot on this street." I thanked her, carrying the empty plate back to my house. And as I closed the door behind me, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months. Excitement. The stage was set, the ally recruited, the curtain was about to rise. And for the first time, I wasn't dreading Jessica's return. I was anticipating it. The house felt unnervingly quiet after my meeting with Mrs. Gable. The kind of silence that presses on your chest, daring you to either surrender to it or fill it with action. I chose action. If Jessica had declared this was not a marriage, then it wasn't. And if it wasn't, then this house was not our shared home. It was mine, my space, my sanctuary. And sanctuaries, I decided, should reflect their keepers. I began with the bedroom. My bedroom. Her side of the dresser was lined with silk scarves, overpriced lotions, and a collection of scented candles that all smelled faintly like pretension. Each one went carefully into boxes I'd purchased earlier that morning. Not tossed, not smashed, boxed. I wasn't cruel. Just efficient. Her closet was trickier. Dresses shimmered in pastel shades, each one screaming, "I'm the center of attention." She always said she wore them for self-expression, though somehow herself always seemed to be expressing itself at rooftop bars or in selfies with male co-workers. Into the boxes they went, folded with mechanical precision. With each item I packed, the air in the room seemed to grow lighter, as though I were not just boxing up fabric, but the invisible weight of ridicule, dismissiveness, and derision. My house was exhaling. Then came the fun part: transformation. The sterile cream walls, the minimalist shelves, the carefully arranged throw pillows, gone. In their place, I unrolled a football field rug I'd found in a clearance bin. The green turf stretched across the living room floor, the white yard lines bright under the morning light. It was ridiculous. It was juvenile. It was perfect. Next came the recliner, oversized, brown, the kind of chair that swallows you whole and doesn't apologize for it. I placed it directly where Jessica's chic Scandinavian sofa had been, angling it toward the television like a king on his throne. But the crown jewel, the true centerpiece, was the pinball machine. Classic design, neon lights, silver balls ready to ricochet. I wheeled it into the dining room, right where Jessica once insisted on keeping a long farmhouse-style table we barely used. Now, instead of a performative dinner setting, there stood a monument to unapologetic fun. By the time I finished redecorating, the house didn't just look different, it felt different. The air hummed with defiance. The walls no longer whispered Jessica's preferences. They shouted mine, and then came Gus. I'd called earlier in the week, reserving him for Sunday morning pickup. A St. Bernard, massive and lumbering, with the kind of jowls that flapped when he shook his head. He was everything Jessica hated in a pet. Loud, drooling, unrefined, which made him everything I loved in that moment. When the adoption volunteer opened the kennel, Gus waddled toward me with a slow, deliberate confidence, as if he already knew he was home. His tail swayed like a metronome, his tongue lolled out of his mouth, and when he leaned his enormous head against my thigh, I felt a surge of loyalty I hadn't felt in years. On the drive home, he drooled on the passenger seat, fogging up the window with hot breaths. I couldn't stop grinning. By the time we pulled into the driveway, Gus had already claimed me as his own. He lumbered inside, took one look at the football rug, and sprawled across it as though it had been laid down solely for his comfort. Within minutes, he was snoring. Looking around at my transformed home, I realized something. This wasn't just pettiness, it was reclamation. Each absurd choice, the rug, the recliner, the pinball machine, the dog, was a declaration. This is who I am. This is my space. For so long, I'd allowed Jessica to dictate what acceptable looked like. Neutral tones, clean lines, quiet living. But acceptable for her had always meant erasure for me. Not anymore. The stage was ready, the set complete. All that remained was for the actress to walk back into the theatre, expecting her role, only to find the play rewritten without her. I stood in the middle of the room, Gus snoring at my feet, the pinball machine flashing in idle mode, and I felt the strangest thing, not anger, not bitterness, relief. For the first time in years, my house felt alive, and I couldn't wait for Jessica to see it. Sunday evening arrived, with the same weight as a storm rolling in. The air outside was heavy, thick, as though the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Inside my house, Gus snored on the football rug, his massive body sprawled like a fallen tree. The recliner creaked under me as I shifted, glancing at the clock. 6:12 p.m. Jessica's train from the city should have arrived by now. Any minute, her car would pull into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the lawn like spotlights announcing her grand return. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head a dozen times. Not what I would say, because I planned to say nothing at all, but how it would feel. I expected nerves, maybe guilt. Instead, I felt calm, almost amused. Then, as if on cue, the headlights cut across the window. Gus's ears twitched. The engine cut off. Showtime. I stayed in the recliner, stroking Gus's fur as Jessica's heels clicked up the driveway. The sound was sharp, staccato, each step carrying the confidence of a woman returning to what she thought was still hers. The first rattle of the doorknob made Gus lift his head. The second rattle made him bark, deep, booming, the kind of bark that reverberated through the floorboards. "What the?" Jessica's voice shot through the door, shrill with surprise. She jiggled the knob again, harder this time. Then came the metallic scrape of a key sliding into the lock. A twist, a pause, another twist. The lock held. Her voice rose, tinged with disbelief. "What the hell?" I leaned back further into the recliner, the corner of my mouth twitching upward. The new deadbolt I'd installed gleamed proudly on the other side of that door. Gus barked again, this time closer, planting himself firmly between me and the sound of her struggle. His jowls flapped as he growled low and steady. Jessica's voice grew frantic. She pounded on the door with her palm. "Tom, open the door." "My key isn't working." I said nothing. Silence is the cruelest language. Her phone buzzed against the doorframe a few minutes later, the vibration echoing faintly. Then it buzzed again. She was calling. I let it ring. Then again, declined. Then texts, one after another, popping up on my screen. "Jessica, did you change the locks?" "Jessica, this isn't funny." "Jessica, open the door right now." "Jessica." "Tom." Each message stacked on the screen like bricks, building a wall between us. Then came the fury. The pounding grew louder, fists instead of palms now. Gus roared in reply, his barks rattling the windows. "What the hell is going on?" she screamed, her voice breaking in frustration. "You can't just lock me out of my own house." Her words hung in the air, bitterly ironic. Her house, the same house where, just days earlier, she laughed and said, "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." She had spoken the truth then, and now she was choking on it. I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't speak. Instead, I picked up my phone, snapped a quick photo of Gus sprawled on the rug, and typed out the single message I'd been waiting to send. "You're right. We're not married. This is my house. Your things are boxed and waiting at the storage unit. Good luck. Send." The thud of her fists on the door stopped. Silence followed. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath again. Then, screams. Not words at first, just raw sound. Rage and disbelief poured out of her throat, echoing down the quiet street. Gus barked back, drowning her out. That's when it happened. The creak of a porch door, the shuffle of slippers. And then, like the opening act in a play, Mrs. Gable appeared across the street, her cardigan fluttering as she waved with the sweetest smile. "Oh, Jessica, dear. You're back." Oh, I heard the most wonderful news. Tom redecorated the house. You should see it. It's so lively now. And he got a dog. Such a big, handsome boy. Isn't that lovely? Her voice carried, clear and sharp, each word perfectly rehearsed. Jessica froze. I couldn't see her face from the recliner, but I could feel it, The heat, the shock, the humiliation of being narrated by an 80-year-old neighbour as though she were the villain in a soap opera. She pounded the door one last time, her shriek half rage, half despair. "Tom!" But I didn't move, because the curtain had fallen, and for once, I was no longer the fool on her stage. Jessica's fists had gone from pounding to clawing, her nails dragging down the wood as though sheer willpower could etch her entry back into the house. Gus barked furiously on my side of the door, his deep growls vibrating like a drum roll before the main act, and then, cue the spotlight. Mrs. Evelyn Gable shuffled closer from across the street, the hem of her cardigan swaying, her slippers tapping against the pavement with theatrical timing. To anyone else, it might have looked like a sweet old lady wandering over to check on a commotion. But I knew better. This was the entrance of a seasoned actress taking centre stage. "Oh, Jessica, darling." Mrs. Gable's voice rang out, honeyed but sharp, each syllable laced with polite malice. "Why, I didn't realize you'd be back so soon." Jessica spun around, her face flushed crimson, mascara smudged from the tears she swore she didn't shed. "Mrs. Gable, hi, there's been a mistake. My key isn't working." Mrs. Gable tilted her head, eyes wide with the practiced innocence of someone who already knew the ending to the story. "Oh, a mistake? Oh no, dear. There's no mistake at all." Jessica blinked, confusion and fury twisting her expression. "What do you mean?" That's when Mrs. Gable delivered her first dagger. "Why, Tom's been so busy all weekend. Didn't you know? He told me everything. He redecorated the house from top to bottom. It's practically unrecognizable in there. Oh, it's just wonderful." Jessica's jaw dropped, the words hitting her like bricks. She stammered. What? He can't. That's our house." Mrs. Gable's smile widened, the kind of smile that could cut glass. "Oh, and the dog. My, what a dog. A magnificent St. Bernard. Such a loyal, protective creature. He's already made himself right at home. Tom said he'd always wanted one, and now, well, he finally has it." From behind the door, as if on cue, Gus let out a thunderous bark that rattled the glass. Jessica flinched. Mrs. Gable leaned on her porch cane, her voice dropping into a mock confidential whisper that still carried across the driveway. "Isn't it just darling? Tom told me he was reclaiming his space. Oh, it's so inspiring to see a young man take control of his life. You should be proud of him." Jessica's composure cracked. She spun back to the door, her palms flat against it, shouting through the wood. "Tom, this is insane. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Open the damn door." But Mrs. Gable wasn't finished. No, this was her soliloquy, and she had saved the killing blow for last. She clasped her hands together, her voice bright with grandmotherly cheer. "Oh, Jessica dear, don't you remember? You said it yourself the other day. Stop acting like we're married." Why, Tom listened. "Isn't that wonderful? A man who actually takes your words seriously. Not many of those around anymore." Silence. The line struck Jessica harder than any scream could have. She froze, her hands slipping from the door. The reality of her own words, casually thrown out in mockery, now weaponized against her, settled in like a poison. Her voice cracked when it finally returned. No, that's not what I..." She spun back to Mrs. Gable, desperation in her eyes. "You don't understand. We've been together for years. He can't just..." But Mrs. Gable's smile stayed fixed, unyielding, radiant in its cruelty. "Oh, but dear, he can. And he did." Jessica staggered back a step, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Her confidence, the smirking, dismissive woman who once mocked me in my own kitchen, was gone. In her place stood someone unraveling, stripped bare in front of an audience she hadn't chosen. And then the worst humiliation of all. The neighbours. Curtains twitched. Lights flicked on. One by one, other residents peeked from their porches and windows, drawn by the shouting, the barking, the spectacle. Jessica was no longer arguing with me, or even Mrs. Gable. She was performing for the entire street, and losing. Her final attempt at dignity was a scream, raw and jagged. "This isn't over, Tom. You hear me? This is not over!" But her voice cracked mid-sentence, and even she seemed to realize how hollow it sounded. She stumbled down the steps, fumbling for her phone with trembling hands, muttering curses as she stormed toward her car. Mrs. Gable, ever the professional, gave her closing line with a sweet little wave. "Drive safe, dear." The car door slammed, the engine roared, tires screeched as Jessica peeled away, leaving behind nothing but the echo of her rage and the faint smell of burnt rubber. Inside the house, Gus let out one final bark, then flopped back onto the rug with a huff. I exhaled slowly, a laugh bubbling up from my chest. Not a cruel laugh, just one of relief, disbelief, and something dangerously close to joy. Because in that moment, it hit me. The performance was over, and I wasn't the supporting act anymore. The sound of Jessica's car peeling away faded into the night, leaving a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the windows. I sat there, beer in hand, Gus's massive head sprawled across my lap. And for the first time in months, no, years, I felt something I hadn't dared to believe I would ever feel. Again, peace. But peace never lasts long when you're dealing with someone like Jessica. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again and again. The vibrations rattled against the glass. Top of the pinball machine I had converted into a side table. Each time, the caller ID lit up with her name. I ignored it, my thumb hovering over the screen, watching it glow and fade, decline, decline, decline. It was like watching a fish thrash on dry land. Desperate, ugly. I didn't feel anger anymore, just an odd sense of detachment, the kind you get when you've already written the ending to a story, and someone else is still struggling with the middle chapters. And then the texts came. First, a flood of exclamation points. Caps lock, frantic punctuation. What the hell, Tom? Open the door. This is crazy. My tea isn't working. I know you can hear me. Another. Stop being childish. This isn't funny. Let me in. Now. And then, the inevitable shift. The bargaining, please, okay? Let's just talk about this. You're overreacting. I didn't mean it like that. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have replied. Could have given her a piece of my mind. Unleashed the months of frustration I'd bottled up. But instead, I remembered her words in that kitchen. The derisive laugh. The smirking chorus of harpies. Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with. So I gave her exactly what she asked for. I typed one message. Short. Cold. Final. You said we're not married. You said I don't get a say. I agree. This is my house and you don't get a say in it. Your things are safe in storage. Unit 42, code 1234. You have 1 month. Have a great life. And then I blocked her. The moment my finger tapped that block button, a strange calm swept over me. Not triumph, not spite, something deeper. Closure. Like slamming a door that had been creaking open in the wind for far too long. Outside, Jessica screamed. A sound so raw it sent Gus lurching upright, ears perked, a low growl vibrating in his throat. Through the video doorbell, I watched her read the message, her face contorting with disbelief, then fury, then despair. She hurled her phone into the grass, stomped, ranted, gestured wildly toward the house as if sheer willpower could summon me to the door. It was chaos, a full-blown meltdown, complete with tears, shrieks, and the kind of dramatic monologue only an audience of one could appreciate. And yet, I didn't move, didn't answer, didn't even open the blinds. For so long, I had been the man with the wooden spoon in hand, pasta sauce dripping to the floor while laughter echoed around me. But not tonight. Tonight, I was the director, not the fool. Eventually, the headlights of a familiar car cut across the street. Tiffany, the leader of the Harpies, swooped in like a vulture circling fresh carrion. Jessica, wild-eyed and trembling, stormed into the passenger seat. Tiffany gave a sharp look toward the house. But Jessica's sobbing drowned out whatever judgment she might have wanted to deliver. The car door slammed, the engine revved, and they sped away into the darkness. Silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was rich, layered, alive, the kind of silence that follows the end of a storm, when the air smells fresher and the world feels new again. I leaned back into the sofa, Gus flopping onto me with the weight of a fallen tree. His drool soaked my shirt, but I didn't care. I scratched behind his ears, whispered, "Good boy," and let myself smile, because Jessica's meltdown wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The real storm was still ahead. The battlefield was shifting from kitchens and doorsteps to a new, far more treacherous arena. Social media. If Jessica had one true religion, it wasn't love. It wasn't even freedom. It was attention. And like any devout believer, when reality collapsed, she turned to her altar, her phone screen. By Monday morning, the online theatre had begun. Her Instagram story was first, a photo of her hand clutching a wine glass set against a dimly lit backdrop. The caption read in shaky white text, "Some men can't handle a strong, independent woman." Cue the sad piano track. The harpies chimed in within hours. Tiffany posted a selfie with Jessica draped across her couch, her mascara streaked like war paint. The caption? "Surround yourself with queens, not clowns. Know your worth." Toxic free. Brittany went subtler, just a black screen with text that read, "Cutting out negative energy one fake man at a time." It was coordinated, like a propaganda campaign, a digital smear war, curated to turn me into a villain, and Jessica into a wounded heroine who had bravely escaped a monster. And for a brief moment, it worked. Mutual friends started reacting. Comments appeared under Jessica's posts. "You deserve so much better, girl. Men are trash. We stan a queen who sets boundaries." I scrolled through it all with Gus's head heavy on my knee, my thumb flicking idly across the screen. Anger, maybe a flicker. Amusement, definitely. But mostly, I felt the surreal disconnection of watching a movie I'd already seen. Only now I was the villain in someone else's poorly written script. It was laughable. Because here's the thing. In the age of social media, truth isn't truth. It's theatre. And the best performer doesn't always win. The best editor does. Jessica had the melodrama, the tears, the faux empowerment slogans. But I had something she didn't. Receipts and a dog. I waited. 2 days of silence on my end, letting her gather momentum, letting her paint me as the faceless monster. Meanwhile, my friends and I exchanged private jokes in DMs, each new post of hers a fresh layer of unintentional comedy. Then, I dropped the bomb. A simple Facebook post. Nothing bitter, nothing accusatory. Just 3 pictures. The first, my living room before. Beige couch, sad balls, dentist waiting room chic. Caption, before. The second, the living room now. Leather recliner sofa, football field rug, glowing pinball machine. Gus sprawled across the cushions like royalty. Caption, after. The third, a selfie of me and Gus, both of us grinning like idiots. Caption, she said I wasn't married and didn't get a say, so I'm finally living like it. Ichaz no say no stay, bachelor pad. It detonated. Friends who had offered Jessica sympathy switched sides immediately. Comments poured in, not with pity, but with laughter. Bro upgraded from beige prison to paradise. That dog alone is a better partner than she ever was. This is the kind of petty I aspire to. Screenshots spread faster than Jessica's carefully curated sob stories. People who barely knew me were sharing the transformation, tagging their friends, captioning it with things like, "This man is a legend," and "king behavior." Jessica's narrative collapsed in real time. The sympathy dried up. The harpies went quiet. By the end of the week, her vague subtweets about toxic exes had fewer likes than a photo of someone's brunch pancakes. I didn't engage. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The contrast spoke louder than any insult could. Because here's the truth about the digital age. People don't rally behind morality. They rally behind entertainment. And nothing entertained more than a man reclaiming his life with a drooling St. Bernard at his side. Jessica wanted a stage. She wanted to be the star. Instead, she became the punchline, and for the first time, the crowd was laughing with me, not at me. If Jessica had one thing left, it was pride. And pride, when wounded, doesn't fade quietly. It thrashes, it claws, it refuses to accept the mirror's reflection. So naturally, the next move wasn't an apology. It wasn't silence. It was legal. One Thursday morning, a crisp white envelope arrived in my mailbox. My name typed neatly in the corner, a letterhead from some cut-rate law office I'd never heard of. I didn't even have to open it to know what it was. Jessica's last weapon, intimidation. The letter was short, stuffed with recycled legal jargon, but the message was clear enough. She was demanding compensation for being locked out of our shared home. She wanted reimbursement for emotional distress, and, of course, she threatened to pursue further action if I didn't comply. I laughed, not a chuckle, a full-bodied laugh, the kind that makes the dog lift his head in alarm. Because here's the irony. Jessica had spent months preaching, in front of her friends no less, that we weren't married, that I didn't get a say in our living arrangement because I was just her partner, that my home wasn't truly ours, it was hers. Now, Suddenly, she wanted the courts to believe the exact opposite. Mrs. Gable, bless her, cackled when I showed her the letter. She even offered to bake cookies and hand-deliver them to Jessica's lawyer, just to rub salt in the wound. Instead, I did something much simpler. I emailed the lawyer 2 scanned documents. The lease in my name only. Jessica's text message, the one where she declared, in all caps, that we were not married and I had no claim over her choices. 2 hours later, I received a polite response. Our client has decided not to pursue this matter further. And just like that, the war was over. Jessica had lost her stage. She had lost her audience. And now, she had lost her last weapon. By the following week, word spread through our circle. Some mutual friends stopped returning her calls. Others quietly unfollowed. Even Chardonnay, the ringleader, the loudest harpy of them all, approached me outside the grocery store one evening. Her voice low, almost sheepish. I'll be honest. Tom, she said, adjusting her sunglasses though the sun had already set. I didn't realize how much she twisted things. I'm sorry, it wasn't much, but it was enough. As for Jessica, she retreated, back to her parents' house, back to the safety of a childhood bedroom where posters of pop stars still clung to the walls. Online, her posts dwindled. The sad quotes stopped. The empowerment slogans faded. Eventually silence, and me? I sat in my recliner, Gus snoring at my feet, the glow of the pinball machine casting colours across the room. Mrs. Gable knocked sometimes, bringing over cookies or gossip, always with that mischievous grin of hers. Life, for the first time in years, felt peaceful. Here's what I learned. The best revenge isn't anger. It isn't shouting louder or trying to rewrite someone else's story. It's believing them the first time they reveal who they are, and then building a better life in their absence. Jessica wanted me powerless. She wanted me quiet. She wanted me to accept humiliation as the price of her companionship. But the moment she declared we weren't married, she gave me freedom, and I took it. Now, when people ask me about that chapter of my life, I don't rant. I don't curse her name. I just smile and shrug. Sometimes, I say, scratching Gus behind the ears, you've got to lose a person to find your peace. And sometimes, you've got to buy a pinball machine to remind yourself you're alive. Then Gus barks, as if on cue, and the conversation ends not in bitterness, but in laughter.